Hi, good evening, everyone. So yesterday Aditya had already taken a few chapters regarding the Economic Survey 2016-17. I'm going to deal with these particular chapters. Chapter 6, which talks about the fiscal responsibility legislation which have been brought in by the state governments and the impact and the lessons which have been learned from them. Chapter number 7 is going to be about how do we create more jobs in India, especially with the help of cloth and the leather and the leather shoes sectors. Chapter 8 talks about the broader review of the economic developments in India. So there are a large number of numbers which are there in this chapter, and we don't need to know all of them, but there are a few things, recommendations of several committees which have been given in there. The Khan Committee, the Arvind Subramaniam Committee, and it also talks about some other aspects related to agricultural pricing and the pulses and all of those things. Chapter number 13 is a very interesting chapter. It talks about redistributive resource transfers from the central government to the state government, and what has been the India story with regards to devolution of funds and the special category status and all of those things with regards to various states in India. And then chapter number 14 is about competitive federalism. How do we grow our cities? And it talks about a narrative that the way we have competitive federalism in India, we need to have competitive sub-federalism as well. So where we need to have the competition between the urban local bodies and various bodies as well, so as to be able to bring the best out of our urban local bodies and so as to achieve the vision of smart cities and all of those ideas. Okay, so chapter number 6, this one is the fiscal rules and the lessons from the states. Right? Now, if I just give you the background of this particular chapter, fiscal prudence is something which is very crucial for an economy, right? What do we mean by fiscal prudence? If someone could just put up their hands and explain to us what is the meaning of fiscal prudence? What is the meaning of prudence? If someone can put up their hand and explain. English honors graduates, right? English literature students. What is the meaning of prudence? Anyone? I'm sure you would have, many of you would have studied in convent schools, would have studied in English medium schools, would have studied in the DPS Purams and the Loyola schools and the South Point and all of that. So yes.
So prudence means to reach a situation where you can avoid the sort of like distress or embarrassment. I mean,
okay.
To establish yourself in a situation.
Okay, someone else who can explain it in a much better manner. Prudence. Judicious use is prudence, right? Okay, so the opposite of that is profligacy, right? And can now someone explain what is fiscal prudence? What is fiscal prudence? See, the point is that if you do not answer, I don't want this to be a session where I just come and give you whatever is there in the economic survey. You people already have this document for that, right? So let's try and ensure that we keep it a bit interactive and try and see that what can come out of this session. Yes? Less deficit is fiscal prudence. What else? Less deficit is the outcome of fiscal prudence. Yes?
The fiscal policy which envisions the spending should be rational and productive.
Wonderful. Right. So a fiscal policy which is adopted by the center or by the states or by the state basically, so as to ensure that the spending which is being made is effective, it is not wasteful expenditure, it is targeted towards areas towards which it is meant to be, and is able to achieve the best of the purposes. Right. So that is what is fiscal prudence. Right. And as you all would understand, there are two kind of expenditures which are there in our budget: the revenue expenditure and the capital expenditure. Earlier we had the plan and the non-plan expenditure definition as well, which has now been done away with, since we have done away with the planning commission now. We do not have planning commission, we have the Niti Aayog, for people those who have not been reading news for some time. Right? And yes, so we've done away with the planned and the non-planned expenditure classification. We only have the revenue and the capital classification. So why is fiscal prudence important? Why do you think it is important to ensure that we do not spend more than we earn, or we spend on purposes that are more productive, that have long-term effects on the economy, that help us increase the capacity of the economy, that help us towards the path of economic development? Why is fiscal prudence important? This is not included in the economic survey, by the way, if you're trying to look for it in those documents which have been provided to you. Yes, people on my left. Why is fiscal prudence important? Why do we say that we should keep the fiscal deficit? I'm sure all of you would have heard of what is fiscal deficit. Can someone explain what is fiscal deficit? Please put up your hands and then answer. The moment I ask people to put up their hands, everyone goes mum. Crowd ke andar everyone wants to say and then something like that. Please put up your hands and answer. At max you will go wrong. Yes.
Government borrowings are market.
Okay, so in simplest of the terms, fiscal deficit is the government borrowings, right? The amount of money which the government borrows so as to be able to finance itself, the expenditures, because it is seen in countries such as India, we have great amount of expenditure, we do not have commensurate revenues, right? So in order to fulfill that, we borrow from the market, the government borrows from the market. Why do you think I said that countries like India, why do we have a deficit budget or deficit financing in the country? Please put up your hands and then answer. Yes. Sorry? Developing stage. What else? Why is it important to have deficit financing? Have a negative fiscal deficit. Why is it important? Yes. Why do we have a fiscal, not a negative fiscal deficit? Yes. Due to large consumption expenditure. No. Someone else. Yes.
Socialist country.
Huh?
Socialist country.
Socialist country. Yes.
Welfare state.
Yes. Please.
The revenues are also less, and we need more and more expenditure on infrastructure and other social.
We
Okay.
need more investment.
Yes. So see, there are all these reasons put together. The most important thing is that, as someone said, that we are a developing country and we still need to improve our infrastructure. And we cannot expect that this investment could necessarily come all from the private sector. The government has to intervene. And most importantly, we are a country which is witnessing the phase of demographic dividend, as we call, right? And this is the time to seize. We have to seize this time. We have to be able to make advancements within this particular time so as to be able to come up, right? So in this time, it's important that even if we spend more than we earn, it's perfectly fine. But we have to spend that money on infrastructure, on building the capacity of our economy so as to be able to reap benefits in the longer run. So now, why is fiscal prudence important? But at the same time, it's very important that we do not overspend, right? We should not spend so much that we have a balance of payment like kind of crisis which evolves in our country. We should not spend on wasteful activities, right? It doesn't mean that we should have borrowings by the government and then we are spending it on giving more money to the civil servants, right? Or we are using that money for wasteful expenditures such as distributing maybe mixers and grinders to people in the country, right? Smartphones is still, you go and tell it to Akhilesh Yadav, he will have a very different connotation to it. So anyways, why is fiscal prudence important? See, the three critical risks which are associated with fiscal deficit is, one is high inflation, second one is high interest rates, and the third one is a weak currency. Okay, if you have high fiscal deficit, you are bound to have high inflation at some point of time, high interest rates, and also a weak currency. Can someone explain to me why high inflation would be there? Please put up your hands and then answer. Please don't do that. Please put up your hands. Let's have those manners to put up our hands and then answer. Yes.
People have more money to buy limited resources.
Yes, so there will be more money which will be flowing in the market, more money supply would be there. If fiscal deficit occurs, that means the government is borrowing and then the government is spending. That means that that money is out there in the market in whichever way or the other, through salaries, through pensions, through transfer payments, through subsidies, through all of these things, right? And therefore there will be more money which will be chasing the lesser goods and therefore the inflation would be high. Why would the higher interest rates be there? Yes.
When there will be more supply, the government will increase the interest rates to outlet so as to reduce the supply of food.
So as to reduce the supply of money, it would eventually in the long term lead to high interest rates. This is one explanation. What could be the other possible explanation? Yes. Please put up your hands and then, yes.
Crowding out of private investment.
Yes, so crowding out of the private investment. Can you please explain that term, crowding out of private investment? What does that mean?
Investment is done by the government and less money is available for the private sector from the banks.
Yes, so there will be lesser money which will be available for the private sector from the bank, and therefore they will, when more people will be seeking money, the interest rate would eventually go up, right? This is one explanation. The other explanation is that the long-term effect would be that in order to suck the money out of the market, what the government would do is that they would increase the, not the government, the RBI would increase the interest rates because inflation would occur, and in order to curb inflation, you would have to increase the interest rates. Third, why weak currency would be there? We have to, because see, the very simple thing, because we'll be having more of Indian currency which will be there in the market, right? As simple as that. So more of Indian currency in the Indian market and or in the market, and because of that, eventually that would lead to a weak currency, right? So these are the three issues, major issues which are associated with fiscal deficit. There could be a number of them which could be there, right? Fiscal deficit could also ensure that you maybe have the rating agencies cutting down on your your bond yields, the government bond rates would go up significantly. So there are a number of things which are associated with fiscal deficit which are there, right? And we can always have BOP crisis like situations, right? And the industrial growth definitely suffers if the fiscal deficit reaches a certain number, because then the crowding out of the private investment would start to take place. Okay, so in order to curb this fiscal deficit, in order to have more fiscal prudence in the country, we came out with this Financial Regulation and Budget Management Act in 2003. Okay, and it had certain objectives. There were certain rules which were laid down. In fact, there was a question which had been asked by UPSC in 2013 about what has been the success or the flaws or what have been the shortfalls as far as the FRBMA of 2003 is concerned. So this legislation was a landmark legislation in many ways. We were almost about to achieve zero revenue deficit, right? Deficit in our revenue expenditure and revenue receipts would have been zero by 2008 if not for the global financial crisis which occurred in 2008, right? And in order to come out of that, in order to save our economy, we had to spend more, and therefore we could never achieve those numbers as we were supposed to. But the FRBMA Act of 2003 wanted to achieve a certain number of objectives. One was fiscal management principles were to be adopted, making it incumbent on the center. So this was a law which had been adopted by the central government. This was a law which had been adopted so as to manage the central government finances. It says making it incumbent on the center, making it mandatory on the center to reduce the fiscal deficit, to eliminate the revenue deficits. The revenue deficit had to be reduced to 0% of the GDP as per the target set out thereafter, right? So what was the fiscal deficit target which had been set out by the FRBMA of 2003? 3% of the GDP, right? Always remember that 3% of the GDP is the answer, not 3%, right? Especially for the people, those who are appearing in the interviews, right? Please don't say 3%. That doesn't leave a good impression, right? I happened to ask someone the other day that what is Uttar Pradesh's revenue, GDP? That particular person said 150 million. God only knows what it was. 150 million paise, 150 million rupees, 150 million Australian dollars, 150 million dollars, 150 million Pakistani rupee, or for that matter 150 Zimbabwe currency, right? So I really don't know what GDP was being talked about in any case. So yes, another was no deviation from the targets was permitted except on grounds of national security or calamity, and in order to be able to change the targets, the government had to take the approval of the parliament, right? It had to give a show cause notice. Please put your phones on silent. That's the basic etiquette. Prohibits the center from borrowing from the Reserve Bank of India. That is, it bans the deficit financing through money creation, right? So there is a process called as deficit financing, where the government of India can tell the RBI that, see, we are running short on cash, we are running short on money, why don't you print more notes? or why don't you borrow us the money? So deficit financing was a concept which was completely put on hold since 2003 when this particular legislation came into being. And then it requires the government to place before the parliament 3 statements covering the medium-term fiscal policy, the fiscal policy strategy, and the macroeconomic framework each year along with the budget. If you go onto the government website, see the budget, so there will be an annual financial statement which will be there. An annual financial statement would be accompanied by these 3 documents also, right? So this was FRBMA, and their FRBMA has its own share of successes and downfalls. You could read more about it. There have been a number of articles which have been there in the newspapers. I think around June or May of 2016, there was a very nice article which was there in the Hindu and the Hindu Business Line regarding the success and regarding the downfalls of the FRBMA Act. Please do go through it. Right. Anyways, so now on these particular lines only, the state governments came out with this particular legislation called as the financial responsibility, or the FRLs. Okay, the financial responsibility legislations. Now the FRBMA was for the center. The state governments came out with these FRLs, which were meant for the state government, so as to be able to control their deficit, so as to ensure fiscal prudence in their functioning. Right. So what were the various provisions, and what were the various, so various states came out with their own various FRLs, and these were some of the outcomes which had been achieved in a nutshell as far as the FRLs are concerned. The first one is that the fiscal targets were achieved, which were same for all the states. Okay, so there were certain fiscal targets which had been set for the states, and most of the states were able to achieve those fiscal targets. The overall deficit of the states was not allowed to exceed 3% of the gross state domestic product at any point, right? So the overall deficit, the fiscal deficit, was not allowed to exceed 3% of the GSDP. The revenue deficit was to be eliminated by 2008-2009. It did not necessarily occur, but a lot of states were able to completely eliminate the revenue deficit. The 12th Finance Commission also allowed states to borrow directly from the market, and in hope that the investors would exercise some discipline. So basically, before the 12th Finance Commission, the states were not allowed to directly borrow from the markets, because it was considered that only the central government can do that, not the state governments. But the 12th Finance Commission allowed that to happen, and there were a number of good things which came out of the FRL. So basically, the biggest thing was that some sort of fiscal prudence was achieved. The fiscal deficits were brought down by a large number, and one of the most important things, the average debt to GDP ratio fell by almost 10 percentage points. So the average GDP ratio fell by almost 10 percentage points. So if you have to just remember in nutshell, 2 major things which happened out of the FRLs being enacted by the state was that overall our debt to the GDP ratio as well as the fiscal deficit of the states reduced significantly after the FRLs were enacted. Okay, so this is the overall judgment which has been given with regards to the success of the FRLs. But there is a question. Is it all because of the FRLs? Is it all because of the legislations which were enacted by the state governments on the line of the central government, because of which the state deficits were brought down? The economic survey says no. It says that there were a number of other reasons also because of which the fiscal deficit of the states could be brought down. Okay. The first which it says is that there was an acceleration of the nominal GDP growth rate. The GDP growth rate increased by leaps and bounds in this particular year, in these particular years, and because of that, what happened was it helped boost the states their average GSDP by almost average revenue by 1% of the GSDP. So the revenue of the states was increased by almost 1%. So because of the growth rate which was seen, in the states, the average revenue increased by 1% of the gross state domestic product. Okay, so this is one thing which it says, and it says that therefore to say that the cause of the deficit being eliminated because of the FRLs is not true. So it says that there was growth of 1% in the revenues, and that also led to the decline in the deficit. The second reason which the economic survey talks about is that because of the 13th Finance Commission, where 13th Finance Commission recommended that there should be a greater devolution of funds to the state government from the central pool of taxes, right? Because of that also there was an increase of almost 0.9% to the state GDPs. And in fact, the economic survey goes on to say that this 0.9% was able to eliminate almost half of the revenue deficit of the states. Okay, almost half of the revenue deficit of the states could be eliminated because of this 0.9% increase which was there in the state GSDP because of greater devolution from the Finance Commission. The fourth point which it says is that there was a reduced interest payment of about 0.9% of the GSDP debt restructuring package offered by the center. So in order to allow the states, there were certain debts which were owed by the state to the center, and there was a debt restructuring package which had been offered by the central government to the states so as to allow them to eliminate their responsibilities with regards to this debt, and that also helped them significantly in reducing their deficit. Okay, so this debt restructuring package which was also given was also very crucial. And then the fourth, there is a very interesting graph which has been given in the economic survey. Is anyone of you carrying the economic survey? Are you people carrying it? Okay, so in the economic survey on page number 114, there is a graph which is called as 6.4, right? No, not 6.4, figure 2 is there, 114. It says that center's contribution to centrally sponsored schemes. So it talks about a long period of time. You would see that the center's contribution to the centrally sponsored schemes as a percentage of GDP has actually decreased since 2011. But if you look at the total money which has been given to the states, right from 2006 to 2011, it has increased commensurately. It has increased by leaps and bounds from 2006 to 11, and because of this, several responsibilities of the state governments in education, in health sector, and in the rural development areas could be taken care of by these centrally sponsored schemes. Centrally sponsored schemes such as MG Narega, for example, or the National Rural Health Mission, or Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan. So all of these centrally sponsored schemes, the central government spent more money, and therefore it allowed the state governments to spend less on these areas, and therefore to be able to improve their fiscal situation overall. Okay, so these are the reasons which are given. These are called as the exogenous reasons by the economic survey, so as to explain that why probably the FRLs were not the only reason because of which we witnessed decreased revenue or decreased deficits. Okay, now, so the FRLs were enacted. The FRLs were able to achieve certain objectives. Some of the objectives which they achieved could also be attributed to some other reasons as well. But there is a very interesting observation which is made by the economic survey. Okay, I'll just read it out for you. It says that rather than encouraging states to tighten their belts, the role of the FRL has been to prevent them from spending all their windfall, all the money, instead of tightening the belt. So it's not that states have reduced profligacy. They have stopped reducing on frivolous things, or they have stopped reducing, or they have reduced their revenue expenditure. But what has happened is that whatever great amount of money which the state governments got, they sort of put, as it says, it has been able to prevent them from spending all of their windfall. So in a way, the state governments have been prevented from spending their windfall, which tells something. There has been a lot of analysis which has been done, but the bottom line is this. So which tells us something very interesting, that the FRLs were not necessarily very successful in cutting down the revenue deficits or the fiscal deficit for the states. And in fact, after a period of time, the situation came back to the square one, right? So it says that this is suggested by the quick delay post FRL. What does that mean? That is, a few years after the FRL, that is the financial responsibility legislation was enacted by a particular state, all the indicators of fiscal performance, deficits, expenditures, and especially off-budget activities started to deteriorate. So for a few years, things were in control, but after that, the states were again back to their old habits. Right? So therefore it says that there are a few lessons which are to be learned from this. That yes, FRLs could achieve their objectives in the short term, but they were not able to achieve the objectives in the longer run. Okay. Now, before I come to what are the lessons which are there from this and what the economic survey talks about, what could be the probable question which could be framed out of this particular topic as far as prelims and mains is concerned. When we talk about prelims, there could be a question about FRBMA. There could be a question which could be related to fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, and all of these concepts generally. Another interesting thing which I'll just talk about is that in India, it has been seen since last few decades. It's not the states which have been spending in a profligate way, but it's been the center. The central government has been indisciplined as far as spending is concerned, not the states. States have largely controlled their deficits. It's the center which is causing mischief. Right? So if there is a question which is asked with regards to the deficit of the states or with regards to deficit of the states vis-a-vis the center, and what is the revenue deficit or the fiscal deficit of the center, and what are the advantages, disadvantages, there could be a question which can be framed on this aspect in the prelims. As far as mains is concerned, the question could be broad overall about the efficiency of such legislations. Do they really help in curbing down on fiscal deficits and controlling the fiscal profligacy of the governments? If not, then what are the steps which should be taken so as to ensure greater fiscal prudence in the future? Okay. So that could be one question which could be framed out of mains. In mains, I don't think there could be more which would be sort of there on this particular question, because FRBMA ke andar they have already asked the question. But yes, if you are appearing for the interview, this could again be an important question, especially if you are an economic student or generally also in terms of what do you think, has the FRBMA been successful or has it been unsuccessful? What are the shortfalls which have been there? And what about the state governments then? And why is it that the state governments have been able to do better than the central government, and so on and so forth, and all of those questions? You need to explore answer to these questions on your own. Please go back and explore that article which I talked to you about. FRBMA के ऊपर एक बहुत अच्छा article आया था हिंदू में, where it talked about that what are the shortcomings which have been there as far as the FRBMA is concerned, and then what's the way ahead. So now they are saying that we should have a we should have a council which should necessarily look into the proper implementation of the FRBMA. See, one of the reasons for that is, you might say that why one more institution to look into the proper enactment or proper implementation of an act, because parliament in this country has stopped functioning. Right? So the FRBMA, if it has to be enforced, a large responsibility of that falls on the parliament so as to hold the government accountable. But that is not something which has happened. And that's one of the reasons which has been given. And plus, FRBMA has not been very, very successful also. There have been a number of times when there have been ceilings which have been devised and all of those things. So that is, and we have still not been able to achieve the targets. In fact, when I'm going to talk about the revenue fiscal deficit target which is there, so the economic survey says that it would be somewhere around 3.5% of the GDP, the fiscal deficit, down from 3.9% of the previous year, but still very high. Okay, so what are the future lessons which have been obtained from these fiscal responsibility legislations which have been enacted by the state governments? The first and the foremost is with regards to the need to incentivizing good fiscal performance. So the 13th Finance Commission came out with something very interesting. The 13th Finance Commission recommended that the allocation of the resources should be done on the basis of the state's own fiscal performance, right? So what is the fiscal prudence which has been adopted by a particular state would be taken into account while giving money to that particular state. And that was a huge percentage. It was given almost 17%. The 14th Finance Commission has done away with this particular aspect. right? So the economic survey says that perhaps we need to go back to the provision which was there given by the 13th Finance Commission to ensure that fiscal discipline is also given an importance as far as giving the taxes or giving the devolution of the funds from the central pool of taxes is concerned. Then it says that 14th FCs attempted to shift toward incentive by relaxing some of the FRL limits for better performing states, but there was some element of tension in its recommendation. So some element of tension in its recommendation in the sense that it has been said that the 14th Finance Commission, what it has done is that it has rewarded fiscal profligacy because fiscal discipline has been done away with, and there is a clear contradiction which exists between the recommendation made by the 14th Finance Commission and by the 13th Finance Commission, right? Another thing which the economic survey talks about is that there is a need for greater market-based discipline on state government finances. So it says that the state governments issue their bonds, right? There are state bonds which are issued by the state government so as to borrow from the market. Now, the rates of these bonds are not either inverse or proportionate to, neither they are directly proportionate, not inversely proportionate to the fiscal performance of the state concerned. Rather, they are neutral. That is, if a state performs badly or well in its fiscal discipline, it doesn't really matter to the market about the coupon rates. The reason why you need to understand that why this is important is because ideally the attempt of the market should be that it should reward states which are ensuring fiscal discipline. Why? Because if you give money to the government and you take a bond from them, they should not be fiscally profligate to spend that money on any purpose so that tomorrow they find it difficult to give back my money to me, right? So it should be performance linked. The interest rate should be performance linked. That is, for the states which are fiscally poor in terms of their discipline, they should be getting money at a higher interest rate. Their coupon rates should be high. And whereas the states which are fiscally prudent, which are sure to give back money to the people, to the citizens, they should be having lower interest rates. The same has not been witnessed, and the Finance Commission, the economic survey says that that should perhaps be adopted as a measure. And then it says that incentivizing good performance by the states will require the center to be an exemplar of sound fiscal management itself. Before giving lessons to the state governments, before giving directions to the state governments, the center itself needs to become fiscally disciplined. It is not fiscally disciplined as of now. So पहले खुद fiscally disciplined बने, and then would they be able to give lessons to the state governments, right? So these are some of the things which are there. Maybe the most important of them, you should talk about the 13th Finance Commission recommendation. If it is said that, okay, we have been witnessing, let's say in the interview you were asked that there have been, the states, in spite of all the laws, everything, have not been able to achieve proper fiscal discipline. What could be done in order to ensure that? So you should say that perhaps we need to re-explore the 13th Finance Commission recommendation. The second one you also need to talk about is that how the market also needs to reward the state government. And the third and the most important one being that the central government also needs to ensure that fiscal discipline is there so that they can then tell the state governments that they need to put their house in order. But before that, the central government needs to do it itself. ठीक है? So this is हाँ जी. क्या? Is it essential to? Which way? Why? Because fiscal prudence is important at the end of the day. Because different states have different this thing, but at the end of the day, this is good fiscal policy. This is good sound economics. This is sound financial management. So you have to adopt it at some point of time. You can't be having such high debts or such high fiscal deficit. And the problem is that the states are not spending money on capital expenditure. Most of it is being spent on revenue expenditure. So it has to be done at some point of time. So we have to start the ball rolling, right? I agree with your point that yes, but this economic survey is not saying the central government cannot do anything as anyways, right? But at least the discussion has to start on that, right? Okay, so now talking about the next chapter, this one is the chapter with regards to the shoes and clothes and something like that. The name of the chapter is very funny kind of name it is. Okay. So they come out with very funny names in the economic survey. Last time or maybe wiping every tear from every eye. They could never wipe any tear from any eye. Okay. So that was last year I think. Anyways, so it says that clothes and shoes, can India reclaim low skill manufacturing? See, the biggest problem which our country is facing today is the employment generation. Okay. Why? This is something which is to be there. One, yes, so if you look at this thing, every month there are more than 1 million people who are becoming eligible to join the workforce. This is data which has been given as per the Labour Ministry. Unemployment rate has grown from 6.8 in 2001 to 9.6 in 2011. The unemployment rate in the country has been growing commensurately. And then there was a report which has been there. By 2050, at least 280 million more people will enter the job market in India. Okay, so we need to create these many jobs. 280 million more jobs have to be created over next 30 years so as to be able to ensure that we do not have riots in this country. Right, because that's the kind of situation which will obviously occur at some point of time when people will be jobless, right, when they would not have anything to do. The only thing they would know is that how to hit each other, right? No, I'm being serious, okay? So, one of the reasons, I mean, you would see a lot of, I see that, you know, people get into road rage and a lot of other things which are there on the Indian roads. I feel one of the reasons for that is that people are too vela. They do not have any work to do, okay? People literally don't have any work to do. They don't have jobs. So that's why people, I was walking through Chandni Chowk once and I saw that one guy brushed some guy and he was like, कि कैसे बोल रहा है मुझे ये है वो, and it started, okay. So ना जानता नहीं मेरा बाप कौन है तो right, that is there. So jobs have to be created, okay. And when we are talking about demographic dividend that our country is experiencing today, if we have to seize that opportunity, we have to create jobs. And all these jobs cannot come either just from high-skilled manufacturing, they cannot come from agriculture, they cannot come from services sector at all. Services sector has been the poorest generator of jobs in India, right? So we have to look at some other areas where the jobs have to come from. And therefore, the economic survey says that how do we create more jobs? Right? Where do we get the jobs from? What should be the strategy which the government should adopt? So these are the 3 points which you could sort of stick it into your mind, and whenever any question comes with regards to employment generation in mains, in interview, you could use this as a structure and then you could play around these particular points, right? These are very interesting 3 points. One is that you need to generate rapid economic growth. Only when there will be rapid economic growth in the country would more jobs be getting created. One is that. Second, it says that we have to create such an environment, an enabling environment where more and more investment comes into the country, right? More and more people come, set up their shop in India, investment comes in, and then new plants are set up, new jobs are created, and more and more people get employment, right? So that's the second thing which you can say. So first one, you talk about the aspect of rapid economic growth, and the second one is that how do we get more investment in the country. And the third aspect which the economic survey talks about is that we need to have targeted action in certain labor intensive sectors. See, we can't be we don't have enough time, or we don't have enough energy to spend our attention or to give our attention to all the sectors of the economy. We can't be thinking that let's create jobs in service sector, let's create job in agriculture, allied activities of agriculture, low skilled manufacturing, high skilled manufacturing, this and that and so many other things. It's not possible. So the economic survey says that let's look at some specific areas. What could be the solution, right? What could be the short-term solution which we can take so as to ensure that more jobs are created with lesser investment, return on investment has to be greater, that we invest 1 rupee and more number of jobs are created in one particular sector as compared to the other sectors. So let's try and identify these sectors which are labor intensive sectors, pick up these certain labor intensive sectors and invest in them, invest our energies and policies and all of those in those particular sectors. Now, it says that what should those sectors look like? What should be the kind of, so it doesn't, obviously the chapter is about clothes and leather manufacturing and all of that, but it says that if we have to identify, so this is the problem statement. The problem statement is that so these two, we'll talk about it, right? Rapid economic growth and all of that. The economic survey says, let's forget that first two. Let's talk about the third one. Where do we find these labor intensive sectors which have to be the targeted ones for us, right? What should be the characteristic of these sectors? It says the sectors should be able to generate jobs that are formal and productive, provide bang for buck in terms of jobs created relative to investment. So if I invest 5 rupees, it should be able to give me 5 jobs or whatever. That ratio has to be higher in terms of these particular sectors, because we are a developing economy. We do not have so many resources to spend. Otherwise, the best what they used to do in the earlier times, in the ancient times, as you would have known, when akal pad jata tha ya sukha pad jata tha, so what the Raja used to do was that he used to say, Taj Mahal banao jao, right? Or he used to say that create this particular monument, because then people would have some job, right? We can't do that. So we have to see that, even though our government is very, apt at, our governments are very apt at doing that. They will suddenly order Shivaji ka statue, some statue here and there without any reason or anything. But the point is that we have to invest in sectors where we invest and where we are able to get more number of jobs. Have the potential for broader social transformation as they employ women. So any of the sector which has broader, so as they employ women or people from the minorities, people from the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, people those who belong to the marginalized sections of the society, the jobs which should be created should include all of them, because that would help us serve the purpose of not only achieving economic development but social development as well. And the fourth, it says, is it can generate exports and growth. It should be an export oriented sector, because domestic consumption के ऊपर कोई sector नहीं thrive कर सकता. If it has to grow rapidly, it has to grow on the basis of exports. So these are the 4 things which it says, and then it says that bingo, even though it already knew that we are going to talk about clothes and manufacturing and clothes and leather manufacturing and all of that, it says that apparel and leather and footwear meet this criteria. Okay, so the economic survey says that, and obviously it proves it on the basis of number of graphs and number of statistics which are given by it. For example, why only these sectors? So why only these sectors? It then makes a case for these particular sectors, that why should we be only picking up clothes manufacturing, why should we be picking up only leather and the leather footwear. The first thing which it says is that every successful economic growth takeoff in the post-war history in East Asia has been associated with rapid expansion in clothing and footwear exports in the early stages. Who all are geography students here? कोई नहीं हाथ खड़ा करेगा, मुझे पता था. हाँ जी, बताओ यार, मैं इतना पॉपुलर ऑप्शनल है. कौन है ज्योग्राफी के? 2 लोग हैं सिर्फ. आई डोंट बिलीव दिस. प्लीज बताइए भाई, शर्म की बात थोड़ी ना है. मलयालम लिटरेचर थोड़ी ना है, ज्योग्राफी है. With all due respect to people, those are Malayalam literature, but yeah. Ooh, all are geography optional. Okay, Rostov's का क्या, Rostov क्या बोलता है? Model of growth क्या है उसका? हाँ, sociology students को भी पता होना चाहिए वैसे ये Rostov के growth stages. Yes, please guys, yes. अरे बताओ भाई, Rostov किसको पता है यार? So see, Rostov says that in every economy it goes through various stages. Okay, there is a primitive stage, then there is a takeoff stage, and then there is one particular stage is there, I forgot, and then it becomes a developed economy. Okay, so it says that every economy passes through these stages. The takeoff stage is the stage which India witnessed when we were in the 70s and the 80s. Okay, and when we were taking off, our economy had started to take off, and it says that every successful economic growth takeoff in the post-war history in East Asia, that is post-1940s, after independence for most of the countries in the world, after post-colonialism, has been associated with rapid expansion in the clothing and footwear exports in the early stages. It gives example of Thailand and all of those countries so as to be able to drive home the point. So I'll just read out what it says. It says that okay, so it says that in the successful East Asian economy, countries where GDP growth booms average between 7 to 10%, growth in the exports of these two sectors was exceptional. The average annual growth of apparel exports was over 20%, with some close to 50%, and that of leather and footwear averaged more than 25%. Okay, so that was the kind of growth which had been experienced in these sectors. In fact, there has been a very colorful graph which has been given. Okay, figure 1 which has been given on 129 number page, which talks about that how the various countries experienced growth in, so it talks about Korea, Thailand, Indonesia and so on and so forth, and there is some mistake also in these graphs. Anyways, so fine. So that is one thing which it says. Second, it says is, in this takeoff growth, India has underperformed relative to East Asia. Most of the countries in East Asia, we have performed relatively very poorly, right? So it's very important that if today also the opportunity is there, and if we can seize this opportunity, we could help increase the growth of our economy. So we have maybe missed the bus in the earlier times, but we still have the opportunity. Second thing which it says is, female labor intensity for apparel and leather industry is very high when compared to other manufacturing sectors. So the female employment which can be generated in these sectors is relatively very high, and it then goes on to give the example of Bangladesh. Okay, it talks about something very interesting. It says that in Bangladesh, female education, total fertility rates and the women labor force participation moved positively due to expansion of the apparel sector. Right? In Bangladesh it says female education, total fertility rates and the labor participation rates for the females moved positively due to the expansion of the apparel sector. In fact, Bangladesh is one of the leaders in apparel sectors. It has displaced India after the 1990s in the apparel sector significantly. Okay, opportunity for women means that these could be vehicles for social transformation. You all would understand, we celebrated Women's Day yesterday, right? So how having the development of the fair gender in the country or in our economy especially will have repercussions socially in a number of ways. You could look at the states where the status of the women is better, and you could look at the health indices of the kids there, the health indices of the overall citizens there, and you would realize that they are much better in those states as compared to states where the female empowerment is lesser. Okay. Then another thing which is there is, it says that this is a historic opportunity for India. China is vacating. So we can't displace China. That's what Economic Survey in a way says. It says that chalo, China is leaving, and now the space is being filled by other countries and not India. Why it says China is vacating? Because China has lost its labor cost advantage now, right? Its labor costs have increased significantly in China, and because of that, a lot of companies are now shifting here and there, and a lot of this apparel sector is shifting here and there, and that advantage is being taken up by countries such as Vietnam, Indonesia, right, Bangladesh, etc. All of these countries are taking advantage of that. So it says that India has an opportunity to promote apparel, leather and footwear sectors because of the rising levels of wages in China that has resulted in China stabilizing or losing the market in these products. It then goes on to say that China's deteriorating competitiveness costs in most, it says that Indian states are actually significantly lower than China in terms of labor cost. But in spite of this, we are not able to capture the space which is being left by China. It says that the space vacated by China is fast being taken over by Bangladesh and Vietnam in case of apparels, Vietnam and Indonesia in case of leather and footwear, and Indian apparel and leather firms are relocating to Bangladesh, Vietnam, Myanmar, and even Ethiopia. So now what is happening is that instead of, so there are two things which are happening. Okay, one, Bangladesh and all of these countries are taking the space which is being left over by China in the apparel and the footwear sector and all of those things. And the second thing which it says is that Indian companies are also shifting to these countries now. Okay, and then it says, so that's what the space is being vacated, is being taken over Bangladesh and Vietnam in case of apparels, Vietnam and Indonesia in case of leather and footwear. So we need to see that what do we do, right? In fact, these again, why only this sector? Again, one more perspective which is there is, so one is that China is vacating the space, second is the women impact which is there, the third one is with respect to the number of jobs potential which it has and all of those things, and the inclusivity and stuff and all. Now the last point which it says is that the jobs per unit of investment in the apparels are 80-fold more labor intensive than autos and 240-fold more than steel. So generally कहा ऐसा जाता है, नरेटिव ये रहता है कि अगर आपको जॉब्स क्रिएट करनी है तो ऑटो सेक्टर में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए, अगर आपको जॉब्स क्रिएट करनी है तो स्टील सेक्टर में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए. Rather, the economic survey turns this narrative upside down. These are the numbers which are there. It says this is investment, this is the sector, this is the number of jobs which are created, this is the jobs per lakh investment. In auto sector, the jobs per lakh investment is just 0.3. Only 0.3 job is created per lakh of investment. In steel sector, only 0.1 job is created per lakh of investment. Whereas when we talk about apparels, the apparel sector, 23.9 jobs are created for 1 lakh of investment in this particular sector. Imagine the number of jobs which are being created, right? Then it talks that, okay, so this is apparel sector, leather and footwear has 7.1, leather goods has 9.9, footwear alone has 7.7, textiles has 4, food processing has 2.4. You would have read the food processing chapter for your mains. There would have been saying that food processing sector has such great employment generation capabilities. This is the sunrise sector in India and so on and so forth. The economic survey says that move all of these things aside, apparel sector is where the maximum number of jobs can be created. Maximum bang for buck can be done in this particular sector. And then look at the female numbers as well. Female jobs per lakh per investment. In steel sector, 0.05 jobs are created for 1 lakh rupee which is invested in the steel sector. 0.1 job is created in auto. Whereas you look at the apparel sector, 8.2 jobs are created. So the investment to returns ratio which is there in the apparel sector, in the footwear sector, in the leather and footwear sector is significantly more as compared to all of these conventional sectors which were considered to be really good. Okay, so now we know that we have to take care of this particular sector, but what do? There must be certain challenges also. So then the economic survey goes on to talk about these challenges. Okay, there are 4 general challenges which it talks about, and then it talks about some specific challenges as well. What are these 4 general challenges which the economic survey talks about? The first one which it talks about is that this sector is facing problems in terms of logistics. This is a huge problem which the economic survey says. It says that India is very handicapped as far as the other competitors in this sector is concerned. The cost and the time which is involved in getting the goods from the factory to the destination are much higher than those of the other competitive industries. So say for example, today a particular tender is given to an Indian company which it says that, okay, give me 100,000 some shirts, or in that case Indian company would say that our turnaround time will be 1 month, whereas some other company in Bangladesh etc. would say that our turnaround time will be 15 days. And obviously when the manufacturer or the person who wants this order, he would go to Bangladesh and not to China, right? This is one of the reasons. So it says that very few large capacity containers come to Indian ports to take the cargo, so that exports have to be transshipped through Colombo, which adds to travel costs and hence reduces the flexibility for the manufacturers. So the very large capacity containers, most of them are not present in India, and what happens because of that is that most of the Indian manufacturers have to sort of send their stuff in shorter or smaller consignments to Colombo, and then from Colombo this material is exported. So that means that you are adding to time as well as to the costs. Okay. The second aspect, which the economic survey talks about is the labor regulations. It says that even though we have great advantage in terms of our labor costs, we have significant advantages compared to the other countries such as China, etc. But it says that the labor regulations which are there in India are very stringent, and which poses a lot of challenges to the manufacturers. The first it says is that the Minimum Wages Act of 1948 mandates payment of overtime wages at twice the rate of ordinary rates of wages of the worker. Now this is a point which does not have any significance for prelims, but you can remember it for mains. कभी भी labor laws से related कोई question आता है, labor reform से related कोई question आता है, तो आप इसको डाल सकते हो. इनफैक्ट challenges which are facing, अब see, try and see that अगर आप इसको इकोनॉमिक सर्वे को याद रखते हो ना, there are a lot of questions which can be solved. If there is a question which is there regarding some other sector of the economy also, तो ये चारों जो points हैं ये उसमें भी जाके लगेंगे. ठीक है, ऐसा नहीं है कि ये लॉजिस्टिक्स वाला जो इशू है ये सिर्फ अपैरल सेक्टर के लिए, ये जनरल इशू है. Right? This can be used for the entire economy or the entire manufacturing as such. Labor regulations also can be used for the entire manufacturing sector as such in India. Even the tax and the tariffs policy, export market discrimination, all of these things are applicable across the board. So this can help you give structure to your answers, right? That's the good thing about economic survey, that you get such a good macroeconomic perspective and then you can utilize it elsewhere in a number of places. Okay, you have that masala and then you can sort of use it anywhere you want to. So it says that the Minimum Wages Act of 1948 mandates the payment of overtime wages at twice the rate of ordinary rates of the wages of the workers. And then it talks about some other things. It says that one of the problems or one of the outcome of the labor market in India is that the Indian apparel and leather firms are smaller compared to firms in say China, Bangladesh and Vietnam. The reason for that is because the moment you become bigger, you have to comply with all the regulations which are put by the government. Till the time you remain under a particular size, let's say 20 or 10 number of people, you don't need to worry about all of these things. So that's why when there is a factory which is there, which might be having, let's say if the limit is that if you grow beyond 50 number of people, in that case all the labor regulations will be applied on you. So companies do not want to grow beyond 50. They say that it's better to just stay within the 50 because then we would be at least able to do business without any hassles. Otherwise the moment we cross 50, the inspector would come in and all of those things would start, right? Another thing which it talks about is the tax and the tariffs policy. It says that in both the apparel and the footwear sector, tax and tariffs policy has created distortions that impede India's gaining export competitiveness. And it says that especially in case of the man-made fiber and the cotton fiber, we have a large amount of duty which is put on the man-made fiber, whereas internationally the demand for man-made fiber is going up. Similarly, it says that in case of the footwear also, the leather sector is discriminated against in India. And then it also goes on to say that this is not only for export tariffs which have been put by the government on the export duties, etc. on the exports, but this is these are the problems which are there on the domestic tariffs also. So this is also one major problem which is there. Then it talks about okay, so tax and the tariffs and the policies, and then it talks about the export market discrimination. Export market discrimination में ये बोलता है कि भाई LDCs such as Bangladesh, okay, the least developed countries, they are enjoying great benefits. इनकी मौज है because they get 0% duty इनको लगता है इनके exports के ऊपर to some of the developed countries of the world, right? And we being a developing country, we not being a least developed country, we have to face this discrimination. Okay, so this is also something which is being mentioned in the economic survey, and then it says that okay, something probably needs to be done about that. So what are the solutions? It says that first of all, Now the government has been taking a number of steps. The economic survey does a bit of, praising of the government. So it says that the textile and the apparel firms have been or would be provided a subsidy for increasing the employment, and this would be in form of EPF contribution by the government. So the government is mulling over the fact that we will be contributing to the EPF of the employees, those who are working in the apparel and those who are working in the textile sector and all of those things. Second, it says is that we are soon to sign the FTAs with the EU and UK, and then it goes on to say that this could have repercussions. We need to be a bit careful in signing these FTAs, obviously, because it might have negative issues, but it says that it can lead to creation of almost क्या है नंबर है 1,08,000 जॉब्स विद EU अगर हम FTA साइन करते हैं, एंड UK के साथ अगर हम FTA साइन करते हैं, इट वुड लीड टू ऑलमोस्ट 20,000 jobs, 23,000 jobs, right? And plus additionally there will be some other direct jobs which will be created in this particular sector. Then it says rationalization of taxes through GST has to be done. Once you have GST kicking in, then all of this discrimination which exists against man-made fibers, cotton fiber, leather, non-leather, all of these things will be gone out of the window, right? So it says that this is something which we are waiting for, and once the GST is implemented, this particular sector could get a boost. And then it says that choice should be given to employees on deduction. So आप में से कुछ लोगों ने जब जॉब की होगी तो पता चला होगा, जब महीने के एंड में पैसे आते हैं बहुत सारे कट के आते हैं, है ना? EPF डिडक्शन होती है, TDS डिडक्शन होती है, बहुत डीकना फैलाना कट के आता है. जो लोग सरकारी जॉब किए उनको तो और ज़्यादा दुख से पता होगा इसका, किस तरह से सब पैसे कट कर आते हैं. सो इन दिस द इकोनॉमिक सर्वे सेज दैट they should be given choice. The employees should be given choice that how do they want to do they want this money to be cut directly, or do they want it to be spending it in their own way and all of that. So उसके बारे में आपका इस document में दिया हुआ है, so you could read about it. So these are some of the solutions which it gives. Obviously the most important of them being that you have to provide certain incentives. Second is that rationalization of taxes through the GST has to be done and all of those things. And plus overall infrastructure improvement has to be done. So logistics के case के अंदर जो हमने बात की थी, logistics हैं, labor regulations हैं, tax and tariff policies हैं, export market discrimination, all of these areas have to be sort of checked. It doesn't, to be very honest, this is very surprising also to me, because the solutions are not really great which have been given by the economic survey. It just talks about the problem, doesn't necessarily talk about the solutions. But in any case, so that is which is what has been given in the economic survey with respect to this particular sector of the economy. Clear? Okay. Now moving on to the next chapter, chapter number 8, right? Review of the economic developments. Now this is ये सबसे फालतू का चैप्टर है इसमें, ठीक है? अभी पता चलेगा क्यों फालतू है. So and therefore I am not going to emphasize much on this chapter anyways. It just gives some broad numbers, data, does some gungan of the government, talks about some of the recommendations and all of that stuff. Typical government kind of a report. So what are the reviews of the economic developments which are there? First, it says that the fiscal deficit is projected to get down from 3.5% to 3.5% from 3.9% this year. So that's the first thing which the review of the economic development talks about. Okay. Fiscal development में एक चीज़ और जो fiscal development में एक चीज़ और interesting बोलता है, that in spite of the effect of demonetization, Aditya would have talked about demonetization yesterday and the impacts to DeFi or to demonetize whatever it was. So in this it says that the indirect taxes have grew despite possible short-term effects of demonetization. Then it says that revenue expenditures have increased because of the 7th Finance Commission. Okay, so the 7th Finance Commission recommendations kicking in, the revenue expenditure are bound to increase. Another thing which it also says is that the revenue expenditures have also increased on the account of food subsidy. So the government has been providing food subsidy. It says that there has been a major subsidy increase by 5% because of 21.6% surge in the food subsidy. So that has also led to greater revenue deficit for the government. So these are just numbers. I don't know how questions can be asked on this particular topic in the exam, but you just need to know a few of them. Then grants for creation of capital assets to the states. This says that this has also led to a higher revenue expenditure, that the government has given, the central government has given grants to the state governments for creation of capital assets. Okay, कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर के लिए पैसा दिया है स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स को, बट सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट के अंदर वो रेवेन्यू एक्सपेंडिचर की तरह काउंट होगा. Even though the states are investing that in capital assets, but it doesn't really matter. In the central government numbers, it adds up as a revenue expenditure. Okay. Then it goes on to talk about, okay, so and sectoral levels के ऊपर भी trend दिए हैं. आप अपना document पढ़ोगे तो उसमें कुछ growth in GDP, in which sector and all of that things has been given. So please read through that. Actually, it's not important. Inflation. It says that pulses have continued to be the major contributor for food inflation, but it says that it has started to mellow down because of a good monsoon that we had last year, and also there have been several measures which have been taken by the government so as to ensure that food inflation comes down, especially the pulses. And it says that food inflation is likely to remain subdued in light of, then it says that the food inflation is not going to increase a lot, and it is going to remain subdued because there have been some steps or some things which have happened. One, it says is that the higher rabi sowing acreage, so the percentage of area which has been sown for the rabi crop this year has increased. Second, it says that there has been a projected increase in production of pulses and key agro products globally. So globally, the production of pulses and key agro products has increased. So obviously that would have repercussions on the domestic produce in India as well, and the prices of the food items. And then it says astute management and price monitoring by the government. So the government has kicked in very astute and a very focused kind of price monitoring, so as to ensure that no black hoarding takes place or no black marketing takes place and all of those things, and then the prices could be maintained to a certain level. So in case if the price of the pulse is increasing, then they will import some prices and all of that. Commodity exchange would be stopped, and all of those things have been done by the government, right? So again, not something which is very important, but maybe if you were to talk about that, okay, what could be the possible reasons because of which कुछ options दे दी हैं कि the food inflation has been controlled in India because of following reasons, और prelims में आपको 4-5 options दे दिए, तो maybe you could figure it out. Now then it talks about strengthening the corporate bond market in India. Okay, so can someone explain what is corporate bond? Please put up your hands and then answer. Economic students, graduates from LSR, SRCC, which all other colleges are there? Daulat Ram, और कौन सा है? रामजस, किरोड़ीमल, DCE के अंदर भी इकोनॉमिक्स पढ़ते हैं क्या? अच्छा DSC, अच्छा DSC, मैंने बोला DCE में कब से इकोनॉमिक्स पढ़ने लग गए? इंजीनियरिंग तो ढंग से नहीं पढ़ते लोगों, इकोनॉमिक्स ऐसे पढ़ेंगे. हाँ बताओ, what is corporate bond? क्या हो गया यार? ऐसे ही बोल दो, सब साथ में बोलो. I don't think I'm in habit of putting up your hands and then answering, so साथ में ही बोल दो. Corporate bonds, please. Someone. मैं आंसर नहीं करूँगा इसका, पहले ही बता रहा हूँ मैं. Corporate bond एक कोई आंसर कर दो अभी. Wow. Corporate bonds are the bonds which are issued by the corporates. हाँ जी.
And till now government securities are in India. The government was the main provider for financing, but in the developed countries and Europe, there are corporate bonds are there, which are used for infrastructure development, and it is now being promoted for.
Okay. मसाला बॉन्ड्स पता है सबको? सबको पता है, पिछली बार आया था इसलिए पता है. चलो, anyways. See, there is a committee which had been set up by the government. Okay, I forgot the name. Some Khan committee was there. Anyways, so एक खान कमेटी सेटअप की गई थी और उसने कुछ strengthening the corporate bond market in India की बात करी है. These are some of the recommendations which have been made by it. You can remember 2-3 of these major recommendations. There is not a lot which is to be explained. First, it says is that commercial banks in India can issue rupee-dominated bonds overseas for their capital requirements, financing infrastructure, and affordable housing needs. Okay, so the banks in India can issue rupee-dominated bonds, and because they are dominated in rupee, they will be called as masala bonds. Okay. The second it says is that brokers registered with the SEBI and authorized as market makers in corporate bond market permitted to undertake repo and reverse repo contracts in the corporate debt security. So this will increase the transactions which are there. Earlier, these traders or brokers which were registered with the SEBI were not allowed to deal in these kind of corporate debt securities, but now they are allowed to do that. So there will be greater revenue for people to deal in the corporate bond market. Third, it says is banks are allowed to increase the partial credit enhancement they provide for corporate bonds to 50% from 20%. So earlier, some part of the financing of the corporate bonds was done by the banks. Earlier, it was that limit had to be set as 20%, and that credit enhancement has now been increased to 50% in case of the corporate bonds. And the fourth, again, this is not something which is very important. If you can remember it, great. Otherwise, I don't think from general studies perspective, it is something which is really, really crucial. Maybe, yes, you should know that what are the reasons for poor development of corporate bond market in India. ये आप prepare कर सकते हो मेंस के perspective के लिए. Reasons for development of poor corporate bond market in India and what steps can be taken. उनमें आप 2-3 ये steps याद रख लोगे तो you'll be prepared all ends for any kind of question which comes on corporate bond market. And then it says that simplified procedures to ease access to the foreign exchange market for hedging in over the counter and exchange traded currency derivatives up to so there is a particular limit which has been set up so as to ensure over the trade counter can take place in case of these securities. Okay, so this is something which is there, again not very useful as far as prelims is concerned. Mains you should know a couple of them, and especially इसके background में जाने की कोशिश करना that why is the corporate bond market not developed in India. Please read about it. Yes.
So what are repo and reverse repo contract?
What is repo and what are reverse? सबसे पहले तो मेरे को ये बताओ कि रेपो होता क्या है, कौन बताएगा रेपो रेट क्या होता है, व्हाट इज रेपो? प्लीज एक आदमी हाथ खड़ा करो और फिर बोलो. यस, हाँ जी.
जिस रेट पे बैंक आरबीआई से लोन लेते हैं,
जिस रेट पे बैंक आरबीआई से लोन लेते हैं, रीपर्चेज ऑब्लिगेशन. और रिवर्स रेपो क्या होता है? Anyone else who might want to take a attempt again at repo and re-repo? बताओ, तुम्हें पूछ रहा हूँ, तुम्हें पता है, तुमसे ही पूछ रहा हूँ मैं, बोलो. नहीं, नॉट यू. हाँ, उसको पता है, मैं उससे ही पूछ रहा हूँ, बोलो. हाँ, तुमसे ही पूछ रहा हूँ बेटा. अरे वो तुम्हारे पीछे वाला. हाँ, अपूर्व है ना तुम्हारा नाम. हाँ, बोलो. Okay, so what should be the re-repo and the repo contracts which will be there in case of the bond securities? Any guesses? Any guesses? Take a guess, wild guess. Wildest of the guess. Huh? He said, see, his question was very simple यार. His question was कि सर ये reverse repo और repo contracts in corporate debt securities क्या होते हैं? इस पूरी लाइन को पढ़ो एक बार, अपने आप आंसर क्लियर हो जाएगा. It says that brokers registered with the SEBI and authorized as market makers in the corporate bond market will be permitted to undertake repo, reverse repo contracts in corporate debt securities.
अभी सिर्फ जीसे के अलावा.
Sorry?
अभी सिर्फ गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटी अलावा.
Money borrowed is given on behalf of government securities, which RBI gives to the bank and then bank gives to fund and vice versa.
Close. Someone else, yes.
short-term loan on the collateral of the corporate debt securities.
Wonderful. Right. So the money which is being, some money which is linked to the corporate debt security, and any loan which is being taken on the basis of this particular corporate debt security would be a re-repo and a repo contract in this particular case. Okay, clear? Fine. Now this is one thing. Another इसके बाद क्या mentioned है इसमें? अच्छा, yes. Then it talks about some of the things about trade and the deficit in trade and all of those things. So first it says that the top 3 import destinations for India were China, UAE and USA in 2016-17. USA followed by UAE and Hong Kong were the top export destinations for India. ये 2 countries आप याद रख सकते हो, economic survey में ही mentioned है, आपके इस वाले document में भी mentioned है. Then it says positive factors which help in narrowing down of the CAD. The current account deficit of the country has gone down, and it says that there are a number of reasons which are there. Again, ये UPSC prelims के perspective से important हो सकता है. What have been the reasons? Because so it can say that what question ना ऐसा नहीं आएगा कि इस वजह से हुआ है. It would rather say what could be the possible reasons which can lead to a decrease in current account deficit. और वो 5 options देगा या 4 options देगा. उनमें से 3 options जो हैं वो ये हो सकती हैं. Right? So one is sharp contraction in trade deficit outweighed the decline in net invisible earnings. So अब वो ये नहीं देगा, but rather it will give the option that when the trade deficit outweighs the decline in net invisible earnings, या फिर वो क्वेश्चन ऐसा देगा in spite of net, तो आपको वो ऑलरेडी एक डेटा पॉइंट दे देगा कि नेट इनविजिबल अर्निंग्स जो हैं वो इंडिया की डिक्रीज करी हैं. सो व्हाट कुड बी द पॉसिबल रीजन? In spite of that, our trade deficit has decreased. That could be because our contraction has been there in the trade deficit, which has outweighed the decline in the net visible earnings. Second, decline in oil import. So you could say one of the probable reasons. So question आप समझ रहे हो? What kind of question can be framed? It will be some generic 4 options. Okay. What could possibly, which of the following options are correct? Or in the context of this question, what reasons could possibly lead to a reduced current account deficit in context of India? 5 options दी होंगी या 6 options दी होंगी या जो भी दिया होगा, और उसमें एक होगा decline in import bill of oil, right? So that will be a correct option. Then it will say sharp decline in gold imports. So decline in gold imports, which can lead to this thing, gold imports. So you will have to take that correct. So sharp decline in gold imports led to a reduction in India's overall imports. ठीक है. So UPSC will go from specific to general in case of prelims, whereas in case of mains they will be more specific. Okay, the question will be more specific in prelims because they are judging your basic concept. The question will be more general in nature, right? That's how they sort of use these things. Now, improving the learning outcomes. The economic survey also talks about that in spite of the improvement in the attendance, in spite of the money which is being spent on the schooling, etc. in India, it says that the learning outcomes continue to remain very poor. So it says that there has been improvement in access and retention. So the dropout rates have been decreasing. The access rates have been increasing for primary education and schooling in India. But in spite of that, the learning outcomes remain to be a major problem. And it says that learning outcomes, one of the reasons, 2 reasons which it gives for the poor learning outcomes in the country, amongst others, is that there is shortage of professionally qualified teachers and absenteeism of the teachers. These are 2 major problems which the economic survey highlights in order to sort of talk about the problem of about poor learning outcomes in our schools, right? All of you would have read the about the Pratham report, or you would have read about this particular report, the PISA report, right? In which India had a glorious 73rd rank out of the 74 countries. Okay. So, right, so there was this PISA report which was there. Anyways, so then it says that what needs to be done in order to curb these 2 problems, the shortage of professionally qualified teachers and the teacher absenteeism. So it says that biometric attendance of all teachers in primary schools should be taken, regularly monitored by local communities, and parents should also be put in public domain. And it goes on to say one more thing, that biometric attendance abhi kya hoti hai, that teachers go into the school, they punch in, and then in between वो गायब हो जाते हैं, स्वेटर बुन रहे होते हैं, and then they don't go to the class or whatever, and then जाते वक्त वो अपना biometric करते हैं. So say that instead of doing that, every class and every period which is there in the class should be monitored biometrically. That is one. Second is that already monitoring of this biometric attendance जो है, that is being done by the student management committees, by teachers and by the peers and by the parents, etc. But this should be done by the wider community also, put it out in the public, right? How many of you have ever monitored the attendance of central government employees through that particular portal which is there now? Have you ever accessed that record? You can go and check the attendance. After PM Modi came into power, now you can go and check the attendance of central government employees. Okay, your friends also, those who are in service for some years, you can go and check their records. Biometric attendance उनकी आती है सबकी online. कितने दिन रहे, कितने दिन क्या, what time they entered the office and all of that, it can be all tracked online now. Anyways, then it says that apart from this, adequate teaching aids, recorded lectures should be used to fill in for absentee teachers. Okay, so in case if absenteeism is going to remain a problem, and then what do we do? Recorded lectures should be there, right? So say for example, if I would not have come here today, then there would have been a recorded lecture which I would have been playing, right? Or something like that. Then it says the implementation should leave for local flexibility, so the same do not end up as top-driven model schools. We have these model schools in India, right? The Navodaya Vidyalayas and the KVs, right? They have done exceptionally well. They do exceptionally well in terms of their results. But the problem is that these are top-driven models, and they do not take into account the need of the community. So it says that there should be enough flexibility which should be allowed for these particular schools to operate. And then it says the pilot of the biometric attendance of teachers should be accompanied with an evaluation of the learning outcomes. Once you have so then it says that ये जो biometric attendance है, जो हर period की teacher की attendance biometric होनी चाहिए, और जो communities को measure करेगी, both of these things should be done on a pilot basis first. So the economic survey talks about that it should be done in some states or some districts for a few months and all of that thing. Yes, it says that 160 163 तो या लिखा हुआ है इसमें कि a pilot project in one district of every state may be commenced for 6 months to be expanded to all the districts in 3 years. Apart from biometric attendance being regularly monitored by local communities and parents, it should also be put in public domain. And then it says that the pilot of biometric attendance of teachers should be accompanied with an evaluation of learning outcomes. There is some data which is also given with regards to the health for all, and it talks about the achievements of India on maternal mortality rate and the achievement of India on your SDG 3 and all of those things. Please read through them on your own. Then it talks about developments in the international climate negotiations. I am not going into that. Please read through that particular aspects as well. एक इसके अलावा एक और interesting चीज़ है इसमें एक there is a box which is given in this particular chapter, which is given in your notes as well, which is with regards to the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan. Okay, accessibility to all. God only knows how they are making it Sugamya. 166, okay. This is their box 2 which is there, Accessible India Campaign, Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan. Okay, so you can go through this particular box as well. Last time when I took the economic survey, I was going through comments on the video on YouTube. Someone said that good analysis, but this guy seems to have problem with all the government schemes. Seems to be a Congress this thing. Okay. ऐसा मेरे को कुछ बोला गया था. The fact with respect to that is that you have to go and see the implementation of these schemes to understand that how they look very fancy and good on in the economic survey and in the books, and they have always been a problem on the ground. Okay. So I'm just giving a caveat that I am not labeled this time. Then there is this committee which had come out, Subramaniam Committee, Arvind Subramaniam Committee, and that Arvind Subramaniam Committee came out with some recommendations on the price management of the pulses in India. And it says that how do we manage the price of pulses in India, and there are certain recommendations which have been given. But let's leave this because you would already have all of this and I don't need to read out these recommendations. Let's talk about something which is not given in the economic survey. What do you think is the reason, what do you think are the reasons for the increased pulses price in India, right? So, Achhe Din led to 200 rupees kg of dal. Right. So why? I mean, obviously, this is again, you know, before you label me anything, this is. I'm just saying that dal has become 200 rupees kg, right? So what could be the possible reasons? I'm not blaming the Prime Minister for this alone. There are a number of reasons which are there. What are they? What do you think? Please tell me one by one. Please put up your hands and then we will discuss them. हाथ एक मिनट हाथ खड़ा ही हुआ था, साथ में बोलना भी शुरू कर दिया. हाँ, yes please. Drought in major districts of the country, right? What else? Wait, please wait. I'll ask you to answer. All of you can answer. Yes.
The acreage under pulses is low.
Okay, so the acreage under pulses, the area which is under pulses is very low. Area under pulses is very low. Yes, please. Yes. Hoarding. अच्छा, आप बताइए.
Increase in protein-based diet from carbohydrate due to increase in income, wages.
Okay, very good. So now there has been an increase in per capita income which has been seen in the country. So therefore, what has been happening is that people have been shifting towards a protein-rich diet, right? And this is something which had been mentioned for the first time in the economic survey of 2012. 13 in fact, I think 2012 के economic survey में पहली बार mention किया था, where they said that because people there is an increase in the income of people, the consumption patterns are changing. People are consuming more of eggs, more of proteins, more of milk, such items which are protein rich, and therefore that has led to increase. Yes.
Favor to rice and wheat.
More favor to rice and wheat which is there in our policy. So our MSP policy and our entire policies are loaded toward cereals. Okay, they are loaded in favor of the cereals. What else? Long gestation periods of the seed. Okay, good point. You have agriculture as optional or what? Huh? Okay, what else? Yes. Wait, ruko, huh?
Provided towards R&D for protein.
Very good. Okay, so the R&D which is there in the pulses is very poor. You have hybrid varieties of the cereals, but we have still not been able to come out with hybrid variety of pulses as such. Yes. Okay, so again there has been a greater income which has been there. One of the reasons could that also be that how MG Narega has led to an increase in wages and then all of those things. Yes, what else? Any other reason? Yes.
Low productivity.
Low productivity, wonderful. So
Industry not targeting properly.
yes. So low productivity and low productivity of the yield of the crop is very less, and that is to be done with the R&D also. Yes. MSP तो हो गया ना यहाँ पे. MSP which is loaded in favor of the cereals. Yes. Please wait. Yes. Increase again cereals and other cash crops which are sort of changing the acreage under this has been this thing. Yes, ma'am, please. Climate change might or might not so much impact the productivity of the pulses as such, to be honest, because pulses are very drought resistant kind of crops which are there. These are majorly the reasons which are there. Okay, so and in fact all of them are valid. Okay, the droughts, this perhaps being the one which has impacted almost all the kind of crops as such, but except them, the acreage under pulses, the hoarding and the black marketing which is being done, the exchange in the commodity market, then the protein consumption has been increasing, the rice and the wheat and the other cash crops being given importance, our MSP policies in their favor, the long gestation period for the seeds of the pulses, the R&D which has been there in the pulses sector has been very poor, and because of these two factors, in a way the productivity is also very low. Okay. So these are some of the reasons which can be attributed to the increased price of pulses in the country. Okay, so this is there. Now let's talk about chapter number 13th. So chapter number 13th is about the redistributive resource transfer. How many of you have read this book called as The White Tiger by Arvind Adiga? Yes, right. So the economic survey mentions about the White Tiger book only, and it says that, see, in India, the problem is that as far as redistribution of resources is concerned, or the growth is concerned, our growth model has always been focused on the coastal states in India, that is your Maharashtra, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka. These are the most developed states in India. Okay. And one of the reasons for that is because they have a coastline. They have easy access to international markets. They have ports. Therefore, they can import goods. They can export goods. Their markets are well developed, well connected to the outside world and all of those things. So the economic survey says that, okay, enough about these particular states which have done well. But there are some other states in India also. Right, and they also have had their reasonable successes as far as development is concerned. So the economic survey says that successful peninsular India has offered 3 interesting and 3 different models of development. So it says that these are the peninsular Indian states have developed the most, and there are 3 models of development which have come out of these states. The first one, it says, is that the traditional East Asian model of escape from development based on manufacturing. So what it says is that what was done in the East Asian countries such as Thailand and Singapore and a lot of other countries, where it says that the first model was that you developed the states on the basis of developing a strong manufacturing sector, and Gujarat and Tamil Nadu are the best examples of that. The second, which it says, is the remittance reliance model. The remittance reliant model means that the government provides remittances to the citizens, right, in form of certain subsidies, in form of food and a good public distribution system, education and all of those things. And it says that remittance reliant model of development, which has been exemplified by Kerala. Even though Kerala might not have the best manufacturing sector in the country, but it has the best development parameters on the basis of human development indices, right? And then the third one it talks about is the model which is based on specializing in skilled services, such as states such as Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, where most of the major IT centers of the country, when we talk of the erstwhile Andhra Pradesh, or we talk of Bangalore, Hyderabad, Visakhapatnam or Chennai and Tiruchirappalli, all of these states, when we cities that we talk about, they have become the major centers of growth on the basis of the skilled services which are being provided, right? Now, then it says, but apart from that, also we have the other India in the country, and the other India or the other Indian states which are not as well developed. There were 2 models of development which were sort of adopted, or which were said to be adopted. The first one was on the basis of aid and special status. So these states sort of developed only on the basis of the aid which was being provided by the central government, and that includes the northeastern states and the Jammu and Kashmir, all the special status states of India, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, the 7 sisters and all of those. And then it says that based on natural resources, we have certain states which are based on natural resources: Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Gujarat, Rajasthan. And then it talks about that these are some of the natural resources. So it says that these are the 2 models of development which have been there broadly, one for the peninsular India and the one for the other India. Now, then it says that at the time of independence, we had an option to choose amongst these models, right? Do we go for an aid-based model, or do we go for a based on natural resources model? Okay, so, and one of the narratives which was built at the time of independence was that our country is poor, and developing countries will remain to be poor till the time they do not get external aid, because they do not have enough capacity on their own to come out of their poverty, right? And then the countries which do not have good natural resources, or the areas which do not have good natural resources or abundant natural resources, would also remain to be underdeveloped. So then it says that let's try and see that what has happened with regards to this. Now, interestingly, it says that India wanted to not go for the foreign aid model. We did not go for the foreign aid model of development after independence. But as far as within the country is concerned, we actually happened to adopt this model. So we aided the development of certain states in India. See, what I mean to say is that one model which was rejected by the economists at that point of time was, they said that there are two ways to develop. One, either on the basis of our own natural resources or on the basis of foreign aid. Our economists said that we are not going to adopt the foreign aid model, right? We had this import substitution model which was there. But even though India externally did not adopt the foreign aid model, we did not depend on foreign aid for our development. Internally, our model was foreign or aid-based development model. That states such as Jharkhand or states such as Himachal Pradesh or Jammu and Kashmir, northeastern states, cannot develop on their own. The central government has to provide them money, right? So this is something which the economic survey says. Now it says that over a period of time, this foreign aid model, which had been propounded by certain economists all across the world at that point of time, and which was not adopted by India, has proven to be a correct decision. We took the correct decision of not going for the foreign aid model of development at the time of independence. How? So it says, yes, so two views of development for poor and developing countries had emerged at the time of independence. Foreign aid, second was mineral resources. Those with vast amount of minerals should sell them to gain capital. Now the counter narrative which has got built over a period of time is, and which has proven the steps which were taken by the economists in India after independence, right, is one, it says that aid perpetuates resource dependency. Recipient countries may fail to develop their own tax bases or their institutions. The recipient countries never develop their own institutions, their own capacity, and they only become aid dependent. They become dependent on the countries from outside for their aid, and their own capacity and capability never gets developed, right? That is one thing which it says. So it says that the institution, tax revenues and incentives that have been found to be critical for growth much more than the overall resource availability. And many economists, including O'Connell, Devarajan, and it takes number of economists' name, and it says that it has been proven correct now that we did the right thing by not taking foreign aid at the time of independence, not following the first model externally. Second, it says is that another potential downside of taking the aid from the foreign countries is that it can lead to a problem of something called as the Dutch disease. And what is this Dutch disease? What happened was, that says that sometime in Netherlands, it tells a very interesting thing. It says that the Dutch disease is named after the impact that the discovery of natural gas in North Sea had on domestic economy in Netherlands, right? This windfall, the money which had been accumulated because of discovery of the gas, natural gas in the North Sea, and which obviously gave a lot of profit to the government, caused the real exchange rate to appreciate as extra income was spent domestically. So all the extra income which was being generated out of the sale of these gas was being spent domestically, because you were not having any kind of internal capacity. pushing up the prices of non-tradable such as services geared to the local economy. The higher prices for the services then eroded the profitability in export and import competing industries, deindustrializing the economy. So what happened was, because of the increased money which was being spent, what happened was that the price of the services went up. Once the price of the services went up, what happened was that the entire economy got deindustrialized, because people were more interested in selling services only, right? And because of that, what eventually happened was that there was no emphasis which was there on industrializing the economy, right? So these are the two things which it sort of quotes so as to say that how the decision which was taken by the policy makers in India after independence was correct. So it says, despite these international examples and the lessons of India's own experience with foreign aid, when it comes to development within India, the country had followed the path prescribed by the first development economists. The first development economist said that development can only occur with foreign aid. And in spite of all the experiences that we had seen, and for ourselves, we did not adopt that model. That is, we did not adopt the model of rejecting foreign aid. We rather adopted the model on the contrary for ourselves within the country. Now, it says that on the basis of this, they have come out with certain concept called as the redistributive resources transfer. See, if we talk about the money which is given by the center to the states, it is given in three forms. Okay, or before Planning Commission was there, it was given in three forms. One was through the route of Finance Commission, which was a constitutional method. Second one was through the route of Planning Commission, which was an extra constitutional and a non-statutory form where the Planning Commission would give aid to the state governments for their state plans. And then this was in form of additional central assistance, normal central assistance, special central assistance, and all of those things. This was completely discretionary, and this was on the basis of discretion of the Planning Commission and the central government. And the third one was the centrally sponsored schemes, where a particular line ministry would have a scheme such as, let's say, a Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan or a National Rural Health Mission, etc. And the central government ministry would decide how much money has to be released to a particular state, right? Now, it says that this money, if we try and judge the impact of giving of these resources from center to state on whether this foreign aid model has worked domestically or not, we would have to see that if a particular state got resources, whether it developed or not. Okay, what has been the realization? And it says that we are not going to do it simply, because that will not be correct. So therefore it comes out with some newer term which is called as redistributive resource transfer. So it says that the transfers which have been made from the center to the state will be adjusted as per the per capita GSDP of the state. That is the per capita gross state domestic product से adjust करके जो extra resources बचते हैं, we will be taking that into account as a redistributive resource transfer and try to see that has the state been benefited out of that. So I'll just read out. It says, in this light, this chapter utilizes the concept of redistributive resource transfer. RRT to a state is defined as gross devolution to the state adjusted for the respective state's share in aggregate gross domestic product. तो अगर किसी स्टेट को 10 करोड़ रुपया मिला और उसका जीडीपी 5 करोड़ था, तो उसका आरआरटी 5 करोड़ होगा, एंड अगर किसी को 10 मिला और उसका जीडीपी 2 था, तो उसका आरआरटी 8 होगा. ठीक है. सो आरआरटी के बेसिस के ऊपर दे आर नाउ गोइंग टू सी दैट वेदर दिस मॉडल ऑफ डेवलपमेंट वाज सक्सेसफुल इन इंडिया और नॉट. ठीक है. नाउ जी, हाँ बिल्कुल पोस्ट एनालिसिस कर रहा है. So it is trying to see whether this was successful or not, and has this now, because we have to see that what should be the model which we should adopt going ahead, right? So it says that the relationship between per capita RRT and per capita GSDP shows that as expected poor states receives the highest transfers, which is clear. So इन्होंने पहले एक ड्रॉ किया कि हम RRT को लेंगे और उसको हम मैप करेंगे पर कैपिटा GSDP के साथ, स्टेट के ग्रॉस डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्ट के साथ, और जब उन्होंने मैप किया तो दे ऑब्वियसली केम टू रियलाइज दैट द पुअर स्टेट्स वर गेटिंग द मैक्सिमम अमाउंट ऑफ मनी. One is that. Second, it says that despite such flows over the past few decades, higher the RRT, the slower is the growth, the smaller is the share of manufacturing in the gross state domestic product, and the lower is its own tax revenues. So, in a way, it is being proved right that when you spend more money on the state governments when you give them more aid, foreign aid in a way that central assistance is being given, it's not helping them. Their manufacturing sector is not getting developed, their own tax revenues continue to remain very low, and their own growth rate also remains to be very slow, right? And then it suggests that there might be something called as an RRT curse. So the more you take, the slower your growth will be, the greater the number of problems you will be facing as a state economy. Okay? Now, then it says that what happened with economies with resource base. So there were two models. So let's see that what happened with economies with resource base. So they identified that these are the states which are having the maximum possible amount of resources, with maximum mineral natural resources, and then it said that in case of the states with natural resources also, the growth was seen to be slower. Okay, so in your this only, it should be mentioned somewhere in chapter number 13. It says that it is found that economies with abundant natural resources have grown less rapidly than the resource scarce economies. Economists term it as resource curse. So RRT curse to हमने पढ़ा ही. There is something called as resource curse also. Why? What could be the possible reasons? If you have natural resources, one of the reasons why we say today that United States of America is so developed is we say that it has a huge natural resource base. But this narrative is completely turning it upside down. It says that exploitation of natural resources generate rents, which leads to rent seeking and increased corruption. Okay, so there is an increased corruption which is there in the system, and there is a rent seeking activity which gets developed within the system whenever a state has natural resources. And you will realize that also. आप सबसे बड़े scams देखिए इंडिया में. See your 2G scam, coal scam, all of the KG basin scam, all of these are related to natural resources, right? Exposes countries to commodity price volatility which can destabilize growth. So because suddenly there will be a lot of some particular material or natural resource which will be available, the commodity prices will fall down or they will be increasing, and there will be a lot of shocks which will be there in the economy and which affects the economic growth. And the third it says is natural resource ownership like foreign aid makes countries susceptible to Dutch disease. So similarly, as in case of natural resource ownership and just like foreign aid, the countries can become very susceptible to the Dutch disease, right? So these could be the three probable reasons for the resource curse. Now it says that what have been the evidences, possibly ऐसा हुआ है, और अब हम specifically देखते हैं कि what has happened with respect to the Indian states. So it says that the mineral resource rich states are Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Rajasthan and Gujarat. The relationship between availability of resources and reduction in poverty in mineral rich states shows that they seem relatively successful. Their poverty ratio fell by around 31% over nearly 2 decades compared with 28% in the other states. So it says that it's not like resource curse is always very bad. It can lead to greater reduction in the poverty rates. But however, the gains were not passed on equally to all the sections of the population in these states. In particular, the ST population of the mineral rich state, which forms the predominant population in these areas. You would have heard of that, how Naxalism is thriving in those areas only which are mineral rich areas. Okay, iron ore जहाँ पे सबसे ज़्यादा है वहाँ पे सबसे ज़्यादा नक्सलिज्म का प्रॉब्लम है. In particular, ST population of the mineral rich states, which forms the predominant population in these areas, saw only a 17% decline in poverty, smaller than the 22% fall in the other states. Even though the other states had a 22% fall in the poverty for the scheduled tribes during this period, it was only 17% for the scheduled tribes in the areas in the states where mineral rich states were there. And there seems to be no, but then it says at the same time, on the basis of this and on the basis of the previous something, it says that as far as resource curse is concerned, there is no concrete evidence which is there in context of Indian states. However, the rich states need to bolster efforts to continue any possible downsides of a resource curse that may emerge in the future. Okay, so it says that there is no possibility of a resource curse which has been seen in the Indian context as such very clearly. It cannot be established, but the states need to be at guard. The rich states which are mineral rich need to be at guard in order to prevent themselves for this. And then it talks about certain policy recommendations that what should be done. How should these redistributive resource transfers be taking place? It says that conditioning of these transfers should be on the basis of fiscal performance and fiscal deficit, discipline of the states, on the tax efforts of the states, as on the recommendation of the 13th Finance Commission. It also says that the transfers should be based on the governance which is being provided in the state. Okay, so if there is corruption which is there in the scheme, the money should be stopped and it should be linked to the governance which is there in that state. Also, it says that redirecting flows to households, that is to redirect a certain portion directly to the households rather than giving it to the states and then the state government distributing it amongst the people. Why don't you directly give it to the people within the states so that the number of layers get reduced and the money gets directly transferred to the household. So, and then it talks about natural resources also. What should be done with respect to states which are rich in natural resources? It gives a verdict of the Supreme Court of India on the Goa mining case and all of that thing. You could read about it on your own. ठीक है. Now, the last topic for today, this is chapter number 14th, competitive sub-federalism. The image which you see in the background is the image from Gurgaon, National Highway 48 as it is now, earlier National Highway 8, and there was this huge jam. Yeah. Did any one of you get stuck in this? You did. Very good. What did you do? There is nothing which you can do except praying and listening to ads on radio. Okay, so now this is a very interesting chapter. Okay, this is perhaps the most interesting chapter and the most well-written chapter as far as this year's economic survey is concerned. In my opinion, somehow I feel that the economic survey this year is not really well written. The previous economic surveys were much better, but again, that's my perspective. So, before you label me something, this has been written by Arvind Subramaniam, not written by PM Modi. So, and Arvind Subramaniam only wrote the last year's economic survey also, and that was last year also. That was good. Okay, so, so now let's talk about this particular chapter. See, this particular chapter is very interesting in the sense it says that urbanization is something which is very important for India, and urbanization is going to drive India in future. In fact, you would have read this famous line or known this famous line for a long time that the cities are engines of growth, right? And that's true particularly in context of India, because today we have almost 1/3 of our population living in the urban areas of the country, and more than 3/5, that is more than 60% of the GDP of India comes from the cities. Right, and we are rapidly urbanizing. And if you look at the rate of urbanization in the country, as recently as in 1991, this is all the data which is there in the economic survey only. It says that there were only 220 million Indians who were living in the cities, and which was almost 25% of the population. And 2011, we have almost 33% people, those who are living in the cities of the country. Urban Indians now form 1/3 of the population and they produce more than 3/5 of the country's GDP. The exodus of rural Indians into the cities over the coming decades will pose tremendous challenges for the government. So urbanization is a very key area for focus for the government. It has to be a very key area of focus for the government. A lot of GDP is being created. People are moving towards the towns, and we need to ensure that the services which are provided to both the migrants as well as people, those who are original inhabitants of the towns, is up to the mark, right? Because then only would we able to have sustainable cities which would be able to contribute positively to our economy, right? And interestingly in this it says that there is both challenge and opportunity which is associated with it. See, migration of people to the urban areas from the rural areas creates an opportunity also, because there is this workforce which is migrating. You can use them for productivity, but this is a challenge as well, and if this challenge is not dealt properly with, it can lead to havoc. Okay, so what does the economic survey says? It says that what are problems with India's urbanization. India's urbanization rates, first of all, it says, appear to have been similar to that in other countries. So there are some graphs which are given, and it says that whatever level of economic development that we have in India today, it puts it on the basis of the per capita GDP. It says that we are on the same rate as most of the developed countries of the world, or most of the countries of the world have done. So as far as the rate of urbanization is concerned, overall, we are doing pretty well. Right? It's not that we are lagging behind in our urbanization, or we are more urbanized or less urbanized. But it says that even though the overall numbers in urbanization are okay, our patterns of urbanization, that is, which city is more urbanized, how much urbanized, and all of that is not. Now, again, geography students. There was a scientist whose name was G.K. Ziff. देखा है नाम ये? Geography, यहाँ पे, you geography, right? You are geography. Yes. पहले देखा था हाथ उठाते हुए. हाँ, बताओ जीके जिफ लॉ क्या बोलता है जिफ लॉ?
P1 by n primate city concept basically. The smaller cities will be in some ratio to the largest city.
Okay, so this is a primate city concept which was given by G.K. Ziff. Okay, geography students pay attention. Non-geography students also please try and understand. See, basically what it says is that the largest city, let's say if the largest city has some X population, right, and we term it as P1, the largest city in any particular country, and if we arrange the other cities in terms of their population in a descending order, let's say P2, P3, P4 in terms of their population. So the population of P2 will be P1 by 2, P3 will be P1 by 3, P4 will be P1 by 4. Okay. So it says that primate city, that is, one city will be having primacy over all the other cities in the country. There can be multiple primacy also, but largely primacy will be followed. This was a concept which was given by G.K. Ziff. Now, this concept has been used by these people in the economic survey to show that how India has not urbanized properly. We have urbanized, but we haven't urbanized in a proper manner as it has been done across the world. So it says that in case of countries such as USA, Brazil, etc., this primacy concept is applicable properly. So it says that if a plot between the logarithms of a city rank and city population illustrates the point, in case of countries such as Brazil and USA, the coefficient is is somewhere around -1.4 and -1.28, okay, which is very close to, which is basically tells that the cities are following this rule. But in case of India, that coefficient is very large. So that is that India, there is a problem. We are not following the ZIP law. And what does it mean? Many of the smaller cities are unusually small. So therefore they are not able to follow the ZIP law. And many of the bigger ones are also small. So many of the bigger ones are also small as compared to what they should have been, and the smaller ones are also small. So the ZIP law is not being properly followed in India. That tells us that urbanization is happening in a very haphazard manner, and this ZIP law which is applicable almost to biggest countries of the world is not applicable in India. Okay. So then it says that, but in future growth is going to happen. And there is no doubt about it that urbanization is going to increase. And it says that in future, largely this urban growth is going to take place in the bigger cities. Okay, and therefore probably in future we might start following the ZIP law. Okay, the ZIP law might just come true in case of India as well. But it says that what are the possible reasons because of which the ZIP law has not been applicable to India till now. One is the infrastructure of the cities are overburdened. So already overburdened cities are there, how can they grow, right? Like say for, I wouldn't say Delhi maybe, but a city such as Bangalore, the infrastructure is crumbling there. And you cannot overload that city more. It cannot grow in terms of its population. There is no possible way it can grow in terms of its population. So therefore, infrastructure is already overburdened. India is land scarce country relative to most of the countries of the world, right? And discouraging migration, particularly because distorted land markets render rents unaffordable. People those who are from Bombay would know. In fact, people those who live in Rajendra Nagar also would know, right? So the kind of rents, insane kind of rents which are there. So land scarce country, and because of that, it sort of stops people from migrating from rural areas to the urban areas. And then mobility in India is also limited by strong place-based preference embedded in deep social networks in India. So people those who are living in South India would never migrate to North. People those who are living in North will never migrate to South, right? So these social stereotypes which are there, women will not travel long distances in India. They would prefer to, if they are from Delhi, they would at max migrate to Jaipur, or if they are from Pune, migrate to Maharashtra, migrate to Bombay, right? So that would be there. Okay. Now, if this urbanization has to happen, certain challenges have to be addressed. If we would be following this ZIP law in some time, urbanization is inevitable, but there are certain challenges to this urbanization in India. What are those challenges? The economic survey talks about these challenges. It says that ULBs face major and inextricably linked problems. Mostly all of them are linked to each other. First one is the poor governance capacities, large infrastructure deficits, and the third one is inadequate finances. Anytime there is a question which is there on the poor performance of the ULBs or ULBs, just remember these 3 points and try and play around them. Your answer would be good. Okay. It says, first of all, let's talk about the governance issues which are there in the states of India. Okay. So when we talk about the governance state, in fact, it's been given very wonderfully in your material. It talks about governance challenge. Cities do not have a single city government or a local self-government, leading to functional overlap, right? Perfect example is Delhi, right? You have Arvind Kejriwal, you have Narendra Modi, and God forbids if someone else comes into municipal corporation, it's going to be a havoc, okay? And plus on top of that, you have various other parastatal bodies, parastatal agencies such as Delhi Jal Board, right? So these bodies are also statutory bodies. God knows that why do you have a Delhi Jal Board when you already have a municipal corporation in Delhi? Because if municipal corporation's role is to take care of providing clean supply of clean drinking water to the citizens of Delhi, what is Delhi Jal Board doing there, right? Similarly, in several other states and cities of India also, this multiple provisions and multiple bodies which are there overlapping with each other in their functions and all of that, and it's creating a lot of havoc. Okay. Second is that so responsibility, everyone's responsibility is no one's responsibility. Okay. So अगर सबकी मतलब responsibility है, तो फिर best है, because then Kejriwal would say Modi ने किया, Modi would say Kejriwal ने किया, then they would suddenly come out with Akhilesh Yadav's name, and then so on and so forth, right? So the blame would go around, but no one is going to be responsible for what happens to the city, right? So there is a significant fragmentation of responsibilities and service delivery across the gamut of institutions, which leads to poor delivery of services in the country, in the cities. Second major problem which is there is transparency and accountability issues, because one of the reasons is, or one of the examples is that e-governance initiatives जो हैं कुछ states में बहुत अच्छे से implement हुए हैं, कुछ cities में, और कुछ cities में एकदम भी implement नहीं हुए हैं, right? So that is one of the things which is there. So governance challenge. Then it talks about infrastructure deficit. It says that every Indian city faces serious challenges related to water and power supply, waste management, public transport, education, healthcare, safety and pollution. And these are the things which are backbone of any urbanization. You need to have basic infrastructure in place for cities to develop and to be able to contribute to the economy. These are major problems which are there in the cities of the country, right? And there was this panel which had been formed in 2009, which went by the name of High Powered Empowered Committee, और हाई पावर्ड HPEC करके कुछ नाम था, राइट? एंड हाई पावर्ड एम्पावर्ड कमिटी समथिंग लाइक दैट, हाई expert committee, sorry, high powered expert committee. So high powered expert committee, which was headed by Ishar Judge Ahluwalia, which said that India needs 39 lakh crores for next 20 years for its urban centers. Okay, for next 20 years we need 39 lakh crores. This is a number which you can remember. And it says out of this 20%, that is almost 8 lakh crore has to be spent on services within the cities. Water, sanitation, and all of those things, right? Now, the economic survey says that out of this 8 lakh crore, so 3 problems I said, right? Poor governance capacity, large infrastructure deficit. अब इन दोनों को फुलफिल करने के लिए आपको फिनेंसेस चाहिए, इनएडिक्वेट फिनेंसेस की वजह से भी पुअर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेफिशिएंसीज आती हैं. सो इट सेज 8 लाख करोड़ में से 87,000 करोड़ विल कम फ्रॉम दी 14th फिनेंस कमीशन रिकमेंडेशन. 14th फिनेंस कमीशन ने बोला है कि 8 लाख करोड़ में से 87,000 crores is going to come out of the 14th Finance Commission. But where does the rest of the money come from, right? It has to come from somewhere. It has to be generated by the urban local bodies themselves. And that's where the problem of inadequate finances comes in. So the economic survey says addressing infrastructure deficit will require resources. Some of it will come from centers and the state. The rest of the required funds would have to come from local resources, but raising sufficient resources has not proved easy. See, state governments already, हमने अभी बात करी थी, that they are stressed, right? सेंटर ने पैसा देना कम कर दिया actual में देखा जाए तो. Even though 14th Finance Commission के बाद पैसा बढ़ा, but overall money which is being devolved to the states has decreased. If you actually go into the reality of the numbers, and they are not going to spend on the state governments. In fact, there is a very wonderful line which is given in your economic survey quote which is given. It says that everyone wants decentralization but only until his level. हर किसी को decentralization चाहिए, बहुत अच्छा है decentralization, but decentralization मेरे level तक ही करो, उसके नीचे नहीं होना चाहिए, right? So the states say that decentralize, federalism they say, but sub-federalism होना चाहिए, उनको कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता इससे, right? So that is there. So it says that devolution of functional financial powers to the ULB. Some states have not even been allowed to municipalities, have even allowed the municipalities to levy property taxes. Okay. Now, this money has to come from somewhere. This money has to come from the ULBs themselves. One is that they can put taxes and non-taxes, levies, etc. But इतना ज़्यादा वेरिएशन है that some of the states have not even allowed the municipalities or the ULBs to even allow them to property tax भी imply करने की power नहीं दी है, which is the most important source of money for the ULBs. So it says that even when the powers have been devolved, exercising them has proved difficult. Municipalities' own income comes from taxes, user fee and domestic borrowing, right? And which has been rather very low. And also another thing which the economic survey says is that as per the data, जिन cities में quality of according to data and experiences across cities in India, there is direct positive relationship between quality of service to citizens and adequate staffing in the ULBs. अब ULBs की staffing के लिए भी आपको पैसा चाहिए, that is infrastructure deficit को fulfill करने के लिए भी staff चाहिए, staffing के लिए आपको पैसा चाहिए. So again, it's a completely vicious cycle which the urban local bodies have sort of got into, right? Now, it talks about property tax, which is the most important tax which is there. अब आपको कभी भी एक क्वेश्चन आए अर्बन लोकल बॉडीज पे तो आप प्रॉपर्टी टैक्स में और एक डिटेल में जा सकते हैं, बिकॉज यू विल हैव सम 2-3 further points to go into for next time. That is, what are the issues with property tax as far as the ULBs are concerned? First of all, it said it is the most important constituents of owned revenue, but problems of low coverage, low rates, low collection efficiency, and lack of indexation of property values makes it a non-buoyant source of revenue. Remember these: low coverage, low rates of property tax, low collection efficiency, administration is very slack, and then the indexation of property values also is very poor. That is, it's not linked properly that posh areas should give more property tax, areas which are downtown should give lesser property tax. That's not been done. It makes it a very poor source of revenue for the bodies. So remember this, I just said that even when powers have been devolved, it has become very difficult for them to get money, and this proves it. Another it says is ULBs by and large have not been able to levy adequate user charges to cover even the operation and maintenance cost. तो जो उनके इवन बेसिक मेंटेनेंस कॉस्ट है और जो ऑपरेशनल कॉस्ट है वो इतना पैसा भी नहीं ले पा रहे हैं सिटीजन से दैट दे कैन कवर देम. दे आर रनिंग इन लॉसेस, ह्यूज लॉसेस, राइट? यू वुड हैव सीन दैट सम मंथ्स बैक देयर वाज दीज entire kachara which had been lying on the roads in Rajendra Nagar and lot of other areas. The reason for that is that the municipal corporation of Delhi did not have enough money to pay to its employees, right? And issuing municipal bonds has been challenging owing to the poor state of ULB finance and governance. One way of generating money for the municipal bodies all across the world is to issue municipal bonds, where what the municipal corporation does is that it issues bonds to citizens. Citizens give them money and they get some interest rate on these bonds. How do they get these interest rates on bond? Let me give you an example. Let's say in Delhi, the state government decides that we have to create some super technology metro, okay, or we have to develop some kind of public transport, right? And now they need money for this. What they will do is that they will issue municipal bonds. From these municipal bonds, they will get money which will be used for financing the metro. And whatever money which will be generated out of running this metro will be used for financing the bonds. Okay. So अगर suppose करो 100 करोड़ लिया है, 120 करोड़ रुपया आपकी liability है. So this 120 crores will be generated out of the running of the Delhi metro. Okay, so this is a model which is very powerful and successful all across the world, but in India it has been a miserable. It has been very miserable. So what is this entire concept of municipal bond? Not given in your economic survey. It says that municipal bonds have been in existence in India since 1997. Cities such as Ahmedabad, Bengaluru, Nasik, and Madurai have issued them, mostly privately placed with the institutions and not tradable. So you can give them to certain institution, but it cannot be traded among the citizens and all of that. As a result, municipal bond issues only touched this much amount of money, and there have been no new issues since 2010. There has been no new issues of the municipal bonds which have been taking place since 2010 by these cities. Okay. Then it says SEBI now has finally come out with certain conditions so as to develop the municipal bond market. See, the problem is it's a demand supply problem in case of the municipal bonds in India. Okay, so if I just come to the problems of municipal bonds, so these are the two problems which are there. which have been quoted by a study. One, it says on the demand side, the conservative approach of the insurance and pension firms to invest in municipal bonds and limited credit enhancements for municipal bonds limit the potential demand for these bonds. And plus, people are also not very keen to buy these bonds because something what happened in case of China, that some municipal bodies defaulted. Okay. So why would people invest in New Delhi or some South Delhi Municipal Corporation or the East Delhi or the West Delhi Municipal Corporation? Because they know that इनसे खुद के employees के पैसे दिए नहीं जा रहे हैं, right? How are they going to give us the money for our bonds, right? So that is one thing. And then it says on the supply side also, issues such as very few municipal entities with high credit, lack of incentives for municipal bodies to tap debt market. वो भी बोलते हैं कि why should we do this? इतनी सरदर्दी क्यों ले? Preponderance of institutional finance. Their finances are completely in a very bad state. And lastly, absence of any particular requisites to issue bonds serve as a major impediment for these bodies to give out municipal bonds. Now, therefore, the SEBI has recently come out with certain regulations so as to develop the municipal bond market in India. One, it says the corporation needs to have investment grade credit rating. So rating is done by these rating agencies. They should have a good credit rating and must contribute at least 20% of the project cost. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि 100 करोड़ का प्रोजेक्ट है और 100 करोड़ सारे सिटीजन से ले लिए, 20 करोड़ खुद से डालो, 80 करोड़ raise it through municipal bonds. Then it says it must not have defaulted on any loans in last 1 year. पहले अगर एक साल के अंदर if you are a Vijay Mallya, then you will not be given any new money. And then it says required to maintain full asset cover to repay the principal amount. Okay. Revenues from the project for which bonds were raised are to be kept in a secret escrow account, and the banks or financial institution would monitor the account regularly. It should not happen that you take out money out of these bonds for your own travel purposes and for your own profligacies, right? So it says that what are good examples? USA and UK municipal bond markets have proved a wonderful boon for the municipal corporations. China के अंदर government is reported to soon start a full-fledged nationwide market called the muni bonds markets. Okay, so municipal bond markets के नाम से they are going to start a full-fledged market where you can trade with on municipal bonds. And this is a report which came out by a particular organization which says that a potential of almost rupees 1,000 to 1,500 crores per annum can be raised through municipal bonds over the next 5 years by the major municipal corporations in the country if this route is explored properly. Okay, so this is about your municipal bonds. Now another thing which your economic survey mentions is that as far as the property tax is concerned, it says ki in case of cities such as Bangalore and some city it had said yes, Bangalore and Jaipur right now are collecting just no more than 5 to 20% of their property tax potential. अगर वो अपने property tax की potential को ही explore properly कर लें तो they will be able to get enough money for them to sustain properly, but they are not sort of implementing the property tax properly, right? So what is the way ahead in order to improve the state of the municipal bodies in India? It says the state should empower cities to levy all feasible taxes. Please give them taxation powers and financial powers. Efficient collection of taxing base. There is need to adopt the latest satellite-based techniques to map urban properties in order to tap full potential of property tax. Property tax को properly implement करने के लिए आप GIS का use कीजिए so as to, in fact, there was a study which had been done by this organization called as Janagra, which is based out of Bangalore. And Janagra, when they conducted this study, they said that on the basis of that only they said कि Bangalore से 5% of its property tax levy कर रहा है इस समय. And then it says that higher bodies should also cede power and share resources with local bodies. Finance Commission can play a very crucial role in this. Finance Commission can sort of give a nudge to the state governments, tell them that you need to give and share money with the local bodies. And then it says also data and transparency can play a very important role. Grants to ULBs by MOUD can be more tightly linked to comprehensive and updated data closure and transparency. Whatever money is being given by Ministry of Urban Development for JNNURM and now the new scheme which is there, for all of these things, the money when it is being released to the ULBs, it should be transparent and it should be linked to performance. And then it says Niti Aayog should compile comparative indices of a municipality's performance annually. This index should be based on actual accountability and administrative capacity to deliver the core public services. See, I'll tell you, what the economic survey finally tries to say is that just the way we have competitive federalism in the country, which is now thriving, where each and every state is competing with each other so as to attract investment, right? You have the Vibrant Gujarat Summit happening, then the Sunrise AP happening, and the Delhi Investment Summit happening, and all of these states are trying to woo investors. They are trying to get in more money into their state, and each and every one is trying to compete so as to get a share of the pie. Similar thing also needs to happen in case of the urban local bodies also. There needs to be competitive sub-federalism in the country. Probably for that, one of the things which can be done is Niti Aayog can come out with an index which can say that, okay, these are the cities which are the best in terms of doing business, in terms of infrastructure, law and order, and so on and so forth. And then whichever of them do well, they should be getting, that obviously would be a benchmark for the investors and all of those things. Okay. So this is about the recommendations in this particular section. Now, this is my email ID. I would be rushing right now. I have to go somewhere. This is my email ID, and I always keep repeating this. There are some emails which are still pending from December. I will reply to them shortly. January की mails mostly reply हो गई हैं, है ना? But one thing, December and November. But one thing which is there is that please don't, please try and see that if it's a query which is actually an academic query rather than being a general existential question of your life, right? Those are questions which are difficult for me to answer, right? Thank you so much. You can mail me your queries. I'll be there after the class tomorrow when you will be having your economic survey. Uske baad I'll be there only backside. So if you have any doubts, we can deal with them at that point of time. Okay, thank you.